What would you do if the people who pushed you out suddenly realized you were the only one who could save them? Ethan Cole used to sit at the top. Now he's walking into a boardroom where he's barely even invited. A single father who chose his son over his career. A strategist replaced by younger, hungrier blood. And today, in front of the very people who discarded him, he's about to prove that being underestimated is the most dangerous advantage of all. Stay with me until the end of this story. And if it moves you, hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see just how far this journey travels. Ethan Cole wasn't supposed to be there. He stood outside the glass doors of the executive boardroom on the 42nd floor, watching shadows move behind frosted panels. Voices rose and fell, laughter echoed faintly. Inside that room were people who had forgotten his name, or worse, remembered it only as a cautionary tale. He checked his phone. 9:47 a.m. His son's school pickup was at 3:15. He'd have to leave by 2:45 at the latest. That gave him about 5 hours to do what he came here to do. If they even let him speak. Ethan tucked the phone into his jacket pocket and pushed the door open. The room went quiet. 12 faces turned toward him, some curious, some annoyed. A few didn't even look up from their tablets. At the head of the table sat Gerald March, the CEO, a man with silver hair and a handshake that could crush bones. He raised an eyebrow. "Ethan," Gerald said slowly, "I didn't realize you were on the agenda." "I'm not," Ethan replied. He stepped inside and let the door close behind him. "But I think you'll want to hear what I have to say." A woman near the center of the table leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. Lena Vale, 30 years old, Stanford MBA. 2 years at the company and already leading the biggest initiative in its history. She had sharp eyes and sharper words. "This is a closed session," she said coolly. "If you have concerns, you can submit them through proper channels." Ethan met her gaze. "I did. 3 weeks ago. No response." Lena's smile didn't reach her eyes. Then maybe it wasn't worth responding to. A few people shifted uncomfortably. Gerald cleared his throat. "Ethan, we're in the middle of finalizing the Vanguard rollout. Unless this is urgent—" "It is," Ethan interrupted. "Because if you move forward with the current model, you're going to lose everything." The room stiffened. Lena's expression didn't change, but her fingers tapped once against the table. "That's a bold claim from someone who hasn't been in this building in 8 months. 9, Ethan corrected. "But I've been paying attention." "From the sidelines," Lena shot back, "while the rest of us have been doing the actual work." Ethan didn't flinch. He'd expected this. Lena had been brought in to replace him. Not officially, but everyone knew it. When Ethan had stepped back to take care of his son after his ex-wife walked out, the company hadn't waited. They'd filled his seat before it was even cold. And Lena had filled it well. She was smart, ruthless, everything the board wanted, everything Ethan used to be. "I'm not here to undermine you," Ethan said quietly. "I'm here because I found something you missed." Lena's eyes narrowed. "There's nothing to miss. We've run every scenario, every model. This project has been vetted by 15 analysts and approved by external consultants. And yet," Ethan said, "none of them caught it." Gerald leaned forward. "Caught what?" Ethan set his laptop on the table and opened it. "Give me 5 minutes." "No," Lena said flatly. "We don't have time for this." "You'll have even less time when your model collapses 3 weeks after launch," Ethan replied. The room bristled. One of the junior executives, Mark Sullivan, a guy Ethan used to mentor, looked down at his notes like he wanted to disappear. Mark had been green when Ethan first brought him onto the strategy team. Now he sat 2 seats away from Lena, part of her inner circle. Gerald raised a hand. "Lena, let him talk." Lena's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. Ethan turned the laptop around so the screen faced the table. On it was a detailed breakdown of the Vanguard project, a massive infrastructure initiative designed to expand the company's global logistics network. It was bold, expensive, and if it worked, it would triple their market share in 5 years. If your model assumes steady demand growth across all regions, Ethan began. But it doesn't account for regional volatility in 3 key markets, Southeast Asia, Eastern Europe, and Sub-Saharan Africa. In each of those areas, there are active regulatory shifts happening right now that will directly impact your supply chain. Lena scoffed. We factored in regulatory risk. It's part of the contingency plan. You factored in static risk, Ethan said, But these aren't static, they're accelerating. And when they hit, they won't just slow you down, they'll lock you out entirely. He clicked to the next slide. It showed a timeline. 3 weeks after the projected launch date, a red line appeared across the chart. This is when the first regulation takes effect in Jakarta, Ethan explained. It restricts foreign logistics firms from operating in certain zones. Your current plan puts 60% of your Southeast Asian operations in those zones. Lena's expression flickered, just for a second. Ethan continued. 2 weeks later, the same thing happens in Poland. Then Kenya. By month 2, you'll have lost access to 35% of your projected infrastructure. And because your financing model is front-loaded, you won't have the capital to pivot. The room was silent now. Gerald leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. And you're certain about this? I've been tracking it for 3 months, Ethan said. I have contacts in each of those regions, legal experts, policy advisors, people who see these changes before they're announced publicly. Lena's voice was ice. If this was such a critical issue, why didn't you bring it up sooner? I tried, Ethan said. You didn't respond. Because you're not part of this team anymore. I know. The words hung in the air. One of the board members, Patricia Chen, the CFO, spoke up. Ethan, even if what you're saying is true, we're already committed. We've signed contracts. Investors are locked in. We can't just pull the plug. I'm not asking you to pull the plug, Ethan said. I'm asking you to recalibrate before it's too late. Recalibrate how? Patricia pressed. Ethan closed the laptop. I rebuilt the model. Lena's head snapped toward him. You what? I rebuilt it, Ethan repeated. Using the same framework, same goals, but I restructured the regional allocations, shifted the timeline, and rerouted the supply chain to avoid the restricted zones entirely. He pulled up another slide. This one showed a new map, different hubs, different timelines, different partnerships. This version, Ethan said, doesn't just avoid the regulatory traps. It positions you ahead of them. You're not reacting to policy changes, you're anticipating them. And in doing so, you open up access to markets your competitors won't even see coming. Gerald's eyes scanned the screen. How long did this take you? 3 months, Ethan said. Nights, weekends? Whenever my son was asleep. Lena's voice was low. You had no authority to do this. I know, Ethan said, but I did it anyway. She stared at him. For the first time, there was something other than hostility in her expression. Maybe surprise. Maybe respect. Maybe anger she couldn't quite articulate. Another voice broke in. Thomas Graves, head of operations. What about implementation? Even if your model is sound, we're talking about a complete overhaul. That takes time we don't have. It takes less time than recovering from a collapse, Ethan said. And the infrastructure you've already built? Most of it's still usable. You're not starting from scratch. You're redirecting. Thomas frowned. That's easier said than done. I know, Ethan said. That's why I mapped out the transition, phase by phase, week by week. It's all in the deck. He advanced to the next slide. A detailed timeline appeared, color-coded, cross-referenced, with contingency plans built into every stage. Patricia leaned forward. This is thorough. It has to be, Ethan said, because if you move forward with the current plan, there's no safety net. You're betting everything on assumptions that are already outdated. Lena stood abruptly. This is speculative. You're basing this on assumptions. I'm basing it on facts, Ethan cut in. And if you don't believe me, call your legal team. Ask them about the Jakarta ordinance. It's already been filed. It just hasn't been publicized yet. Lena's eyes flashed. You think you can walk in here after months of silence and... I think, Ethan said quietly, that I'm trying to save you from making a billion-dollar mistake. The room held its breath. Gerald spoke. What do you propose? Run the numbers, Ethan said. Stress test both models, mine and hers. See which one holds up under real-world conditions. He looked at Lena. If yours is better, you move forward. If mine is better, you adapt. Lena's jaw worked. And if they're equal? Then you choose, Ethan said. But at least you'll know what you're choosing. Gerald nodded slowly. We'll reconvene tomorrow. Lena, I want your team to run Ethan's model through every stress test we have. If it holds, we move forward with it. Lena's face was unreadable. And if it doesn't? Then we stick with yours, Gerald said. But we owe it to this company to be sure. He looked at Ethan. You're staying for this. Ethan hesitated. I have to pick up my son at 3. Then be back tomorrow morning, Gerald said. 9 sharp. Ethan nodded. He closed the laptop and stood. As he walked toward the door, Lena's voice stopped him. You could have tanked me, she said quietly. In front of everyone. You had the chance. Ethan turned. That's not why I'm here. Then why are you? He met her eyes. Because I care about this company, and because I know what it's like to be in your seat. Lena said nothing. Ethan left. The elevator ride down felt longer than it should have. Ethan leaned against the wall, eyes closed, heart still pounding. He'd done it. He'd gotten in. He'd been heard. But the hard part was just beginning. Outside, the city stretched out in every direction, glass and steel and noise. Ethan walked to the parking garage, got into his car, and sat there for a moment before starting the engine. His phone buzzed. A text from his son's school. Reminder. Early dismissal today at 2 o'clock. Ethan's stomach dropped. He'd forgotten. He checked the time. 10:32 a.m. He had 3.5 hours. He started the car and pulled out onto the street, weaving through midday traffic. His mind was still in that boardroom, replaying every word, every look. Lena's face when he'd revealed the flaw. Gerald's silence. The weight of 12 pairs of eyes. He'd spent 9 months on the outside. 9 months picking up his son from school, making dinners, helping with homework, trying to be both parents at once. And in those 9 months, he'd watched from a distance as the company moved on without him. But he hadn't stopped thinking, hadn't stopped working, because that's what Ethan did. Even when no one was watching. The truth was, leaving had been the hardest decision of his life. Not because he loved the job, though he had, but because walking away felt like admitting defeat, like proving everyone right who'd said he couldn't handle it all. His ex-wife, Amanda, had said it first. You can't be everything to everyone, Ethan. Something's going to break. And it's probably going to be you. She'd been right, just not in the way she thought. What broke wasn't him, it was them. Amanda had left on a Tuesday. No warning. No fight. Just a note on the kitchen counter and her ring next to it. I can't do this anymore. You'll be better at it than I ever was. Ethan had read that note 20 times before it sank in. And then he'd walked into Jonah's room and looked at his son, 7 years old, asleep, completely unaware that his world had just shifted, and Ethan had made a choice. He couldn't control what Amanda did, but he could control what he did. And he chose Jonah. The company had been understanding, at first. Gerald had told him to take all the time he needed. The board had sent flowers. HR had set up family leave. But after 2 months, the understanding turned into impatience. After 4, it turned into replacement. Lena had been brought in as a temporary consultant. By month 6, she had Ethan's office. By month 8, she had his projects. By month 9, she had his reputation. And Ethan had watched it all happen from the sidelines because he'd been too busy learning how to braid hair and pack lunches and be the kind of father Jonah deserved. He didn't regret it, but he also wasn't going to let it define him. Ethan pulled into the school parking lot at 1:53 p.m. Other parents were already lining up. Some were on their phones, others chatted in clusters. Ethan recognized a few faces, mostly moms, a couple of dads. He nodded politely and leaned against his car. At exactly 2 o'clock, the doors opened and kids poured out like water from a dam. Ethan spotted his son immediately. Jonah, 7 years old, bright eyes, too big backpack, a superhero lunchbox swinging from one hand. Jonah's face lit up when he saw him. Dad! Ethan knelt and pulled him into a hug. Hey, buddy, how was school? Good, we made volcanoes in science. Mine exploded the biggest. Ethan smiled. Of course it did. They got into the car. Jonah buckled himself in and started talking about his day, about his friends, his teacher, the girl who brought cupcakes for her birthday. He talked about recess and dodgeball and how he'd almost caught the ball, but it slipped through his fingers. Ethan listened, really listened, because this, right here, was why he'd walked away. And it was also why he'd come back. Dad? Jonah said suddenly. Yeah? Are you going back to work? Ethan glanced at him in the rearview mirror. Why do you ask? Jonah shrugged. You were wearing your suit today. You don't wear your suit unless you're going to work. Ethan's chest tightened. The kid didn't miss anything. I had a meeting, Ethan said carefully, but I'm not going back full time. Not yet. But you want to? It wasn't a question. Ethan sighed. It's complicated, buddy. Mom said you loved work more than us. The words hit like a punch. Ethan pulled the car over to the side of the road and turned around to face his son. Jonah, he said quietly, that's not true. Your mom was upset when she said that, but it's not true. Jonah looked down at his hands. Then why did she leave? Ethan's throat closed. He'd been dreading this conversation for months. He'd rehearsed answers in his head, gentle explanations, age-appropriate truths. But now, sitting here, none of them felt right. So he told the truth. Because she was unhappy, Ethan said. And sometimes people leave when they're unhappy, even if it's not fair to the people they leave behind. Jonah's eyes were wet. Did I make her unhappy? No, Ethan said firmly. You didn't. This had nothing to do with you. Then why didn't she take me with her? Ethan's heart broke. He unbuckled his seatbelt and climbed into the back seat. He pulled Jonah into his arms and held him tight. Because she knew you'd be okay with me, Ethan whispered. And she was right. We're okay. Aren't we? Jonah nodded against his chest. They sat like that for a long time. Cars passed by. The world kept moving. But for Ethan and Jonah, time stood still. Eventually, Jonah pulled back and wiped his eyes. Can we get ice cream? Ethan laughed, a wet, shaky sound. Yeah, we can get ice cream. They drove to the little shop on Maple Street. Jonah got chocolate chip. Ethan got vanilla. They sat on the bench outside and ate in comfortable silence. Dad? Jonah said after a while. Yeah? I think you should go back to work, if you want to. Ethan looked at him. Really? Jonah nodded. You're good at it, and I'm okay. I have school and soccer and stuff. You don't have to stop everything for me. Ethan's throat tightened again. You sure? Yeah, Jonah said. Just don't forget about me. Never, Ethan said. I promise. Jonah smiled. Then he went back to his ice cream like the weight of the world hadn't just been lifted off both their shoulders. That night, after Jonah was asleep, Ethan sat at the kitchen table with his laptop open. He reviewed the model one more time. Every calculation, every projection, every assumption. It was solid, but solid didn't mean safe. Not in that room, not with Lena watching. He thought about her, the way she'd looked at him when he left, the sharpness in her voice, the control. She was good, better than good, and she wasn't going to let him take this from her without a fight. His phone buzzed. An email. From Gerald. Subject. Tomorrow's meeting. Ethan opened it. Ethan, your model is impressive, but Lena's team found discrepancies. We need to discuss them before moving forward. Be prepared to defend every assumption. This isn't a formality. GM. Ethan's jaw tightened. Of course they'd found something. That's what Lena did. She didn't lose. She found angles, weak points, places to push. He replied, I'll be ready. He closed the laptop and sat in the quiet. Tomorrow would decide everything, not just the project, not just his career, but whether he could prove that walking away didn't mean giving up, and coming back didn't mean surrender. It meant he'd learned something the rest of them hadn't. That strength wasn't about never falling. It was about getting back up when no one expected you to. And Ethan Cole was about to show them exactly what that looked like. The next morning, Ethan woke at 5:30. He went for a run, something he used to do every day before Jonah, before Amanda, before everything changed. The city was still dark, the streets empty except for delivery trucks and early commuters. He ran hard, pushed himself, felt the burn in his lungs and the ache in his legs. By the time he got back, the sun was rising. He showered, got dressed, made breakfast for Jonah. By 7:45, they were in the car. Ethan dropped Jonah at school, watched him disappear through the doors, and then headed downtown. He arrived at the office at 8:50, 10 minutes early. The building felt different this time, less intimidating, more familiar. He took the elevator to the 42nd floor and walked into the boardroom. Everyone was already there. Lena sat at the center of the table, flanked by her team. Mark Sullivan was there, along with 3 analysts Ethan didn't recognize. Patricia Chen sat across from them, reviewing something on her tablet. Thomas Graves was on a call in the corner, speaking in low tones. And at the head of the table, Gerald March waited. "Ethan," Gerald said, "right on time." Ethan set his laptop down and took a seat. Lena didn't look at him. "Let's get started," Gerald said. "Lena, you wanted to address some concerns?" Lena nodded. She pulled up a presentation on the main screen. "We ran Ethan's model through our standard stress tests," she began. "And while the framework is sound, there are several critical assumptions that don't hold up under scrutiny." She clicked to the first slide. Ethan's model relies heavily on establishing new partnerships in secondary markets: Vietnam, Romania, Tanzania. But these markets have limited infrastructure. The cost of building that infrastructure isn't accounted for in his projections. Ethan leaned forward. "It is accounted for. Page 17 of the deck. I budgeted for infrastructure development as part of the initial capital expenditure." Lena's eyes narrowed. "Your budget assumes a 30% cost reduction based on local labor, but you haven't factored in regulatory compliance costs, which in those regions can add up to 40%. "I did factor them in," Ethan said calmly. "Page 19. I included a 15% buffer for compliance. If it runs over, the contingency fund covers it." Lena's jaw tightened. She clicked to the next slide. "Your timeline assumes we can renegotiate existing contracts within 6 weeks. That's unrealistic." "It's aggressive," Ethan admitted, "but not unrealistic. I've already reached out to 3 of the key vendors. 2 are willing to renegotiate. The third is open to discussion." Lena's expression flickered. "You contacted vendors without authorization?" "I contacted them as a consultant," Ethan said. "No commitments were made. I simply asked if they'd be open to revised terms. They said yes." The room shifted. Patricia spoke up. "Which vendors?" Ethan listed them. Patricia made a note. Lena clicked to the next slide. "Your projected ROI is based on capturing market share in regions where we have no existing presence. That's speculative." "It's forward-thinking," Ethan countered. "And it's based on demand data I pulled from 3 independent sources. The markets are there. We're just not in them yet." "Because they're risky," Lena shot back. "Every market is risky," Ethan said. "The question is whether the risk is worth the reward. And in this case, it is." Gerald raised a hand. "Lena, do you have data that contradicts Ethan's projections?" Lena hesitated. "Not directly, but then we're comparing assumptions against assumptions," Gerald said. "Which brings us back to the original question. Which model is more likely to succeed?" Silence. Lena looked at her team. They said nothing. Gerald turned to Ethan. "Walk us through the transition plan one more time, step by step." Ethan opened his laptop and pulled up the timeline. "Phase 1, he began. "We pause expansion in the restricted zones and redirect resources to secondary markets. This happens in the first 2 weeks. Minimal disruption." He clicked to the next slide. "Phase 2, we renegotiate contracts with key vendors. This takes 4 to 6 weeks. During that time, we continue operating in non-restricted zones at reduced capacity." Another slide. "Phase 3, we begin building infrastructure in the new markets. This is where the bulk of the capital expenditure happens. It takes 3 to 4 months." Another slide. Phase 4, full operational transition. By month 6, we're running at 90% capacity in the new structure. By month 9, we're at full capacity and ahead of the original timeline." He looked around the room. "The key difference," Ethan said, "is that this model doesn't collapse when the regulations hit. It adapts. And by the time our competitors realize what's happening, we're already established in markets they haven't even considered." Patricia nodded slowly. "It's bold." "It has to be," Ethan said, "because playing it safe isn't safe anymore." Gerald leaned back in his chair. "Lena, your response?" Lena stared at the screen. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she spoke. "It's solid," she said quietly. The room went still. "It's better than solid," she continued. "It's smart, and I hate that I didn't see it." Ethan blinked. Lena turned to Gerald. "I still think there are risks, but Ethan's right. The risks in my model are bigger and less manageable." She looked at Ethan. "If we move forward with this, I want to co-lead the transition." Ethan met her gaze. "I'm okay with that." Gerald stood. "Then it's settled. We move forward with Ethan's model. Lena, you and Ethan will co-lead the project. I want weekly updates. No surprises. He looked at both of them. And I want you two to figure out how to work together. Because if you can't, this whole thing falls apart. Lena nodded. Ethan nodded. Gerald smiled. Good. Now get to work. The meeting ended. People filed out. Ethan packed up his laptop and stood. Lena was still sitting. Ethan, she said. He turned. I underestimated you, she said. I won't make that mistake again. Ethan nodded. Fair enough. And for what it's worth, she added, I'm sorry for shutting you out. Ethan studied her. There was no angle here, no game, just honesty. Apology accepted, he said. Lena stood. Let's grab coffee. We need to figure out how this is going to work. Ethan checked his watch. 11:30. He had time. Yeah, he said. Let's do that. They walked out together. And for the first time in 9 months, Ethan felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The coffee shop was 2 blocks from the office, tucked between a dry cleaner and a bookstore that had been going out of business for 3 years but somehow never closed. Ethan had been coming here since his first week at the company, back when he was still trying to prove himself, and caffeine was the only thing keeping him upright. Lena had never been here before. He could tell by the way she hesitated at the door, scanning the cramped interior like she was calculating whether it met her standards. They make a decent cappuccino, Ethan said, holding the door open. I don't drink cappuccinos, Lena replied, stepping inside. Of course you don't. They ordered black coffee for her, an Americano for him, and sat at a table by the window. Outside, the city moved at its usual frantic pace. Inside, the air smelled like espresso and old wood. Lena pulled out her tablet and set it on the table. We need to divide responsibilities. I'll handle vendor negotiations and compliance. You take infrastructure development and market analysis. Ethan took a sip of his coffee. That's not going to work. Lena looked up. Why not? Because you're trying to compartmentalize, Ethan said. This isn't 2 separate projects. It's one project with 2 leaders. If we split it down the middle, we're going to end up working against each other. Lena frowned. Then what do you suggest? We work together, Ethan said, on everything. You don't make a move without running it by me. I don't make a move without running it by you. We're a team. Lena's jaw tightened. I don't work well in teams. Neither do I, Ethan said, but we're going to have to figure it out. She stared at him. Then, slowly, she nodded. Fine. But if you slow me down, I won't, Ethan said. And you won't slow me down either, because we both want the same thing. Which is? To make this work. Lena leaned back in her chair, studying him. You really believe that, don't you? That we can pull this off? I don't believe in things that aren't true, Ethan said. So yeah, I believe it. For the first time since he'd walked into that boardroom, Lena smiled. Not a polite smile, not a corporate smile. A real one. All right, she said. Let's get to work. They spent the next 2 hours mapping out the transition plan in detail. Lena was sharp, ruthlessly so. She spotted gaps Ethan hadn't considered and asked questions that forced him to defend every assumption. But she also listened. And when Ethan pushed back on something, she didn't take it personally. She just recalibrated. By the time they left the coffee shop, they had a working timeline, a list of priorities, and something that felt almost like mutual respect. Same time tomorrow? Lena asked as they stepped onto the sidewalk. Ethan checked his watch, 1:45. He had 30 minutes before he needed to pick up Jonah. Can't, he said. I've got to get my son. Lena nodded. Right. I forgot. There was a pause. How old is he? She asked. 7. That's a good age. Ethan glanced at her. You have kids? No, Lena said. But my sister does. 2 boys. They're loud and exhausting, and she wouldn't trade them for anything. Ethan smiled. Yeah, that sounds about right. They stood there for a moment, the noise of the city filling the silence between them. See you tomorrow, Lena said finally. See you tomorrow. She turned and walked toward the subway. Ethan watched her go, then headed in the opposite direction toward the parking garage. The whole way to Jonah's school, he replayed the morning in his head. The meeting. The tension. The moment Lena had admitted his model was better. It hadn't been easy for her to say that, and it meant something that she had. Maybe this could actually work. Jonah was waiting by the front gate when Ethan pulled up. He climbed into the back seat and tossed his backpack onto the floor. "How was school?" Ethan asked. "Fine," Jonah said. "We had a pop quiz in math. I think I did okay." "Just okay?" Jonah shrugged. "I don't know. Mrs. Holloway makes them really hard." "You study?" "Yeah." "Then you probably did better than okay." Jonah looked out the window. "Maybe." They stopped at a red light. Ethan glanced in the rearview mirror. "You all right, bud?" Jonah hesitated. "Can I ask you something?" "Always." "Are you going back to work for real now?" Ethan's chest tightened. "Yeah, looks like I am." Jonah nodded slowly. "That's good. You seemed happier this morning." Ethan hadn't realized Jonah had noticed, but of course he had. Kids noticed everything. "I was happier," Ethan admitted. "But that doesn't mean I'm not happy being with you." "I know," Jonah said. "But you can be both, right?" "Yeah," Ethan said quietly. "I think I can." The light turned green. Ethan drove. That night, after dinner and homework and the usual bedtime routine, Ethan sat at his laptop and started going through the vendor contracts. There were 14 in total, spread across 6 countries. Renegotiating them was going to be a nightmare, but a necessary one. He opened the first file and started reading. 2 hours later, his phone buzzed. A text from Lena. "Just reviewed the Jakarta ordinance. You were right. It's worse than I thought. We need to move fast." Ethan replied, How fast?" 2 weeks, maybe less." Ethan stared at the screen. 2 weeks to renegotiate contracts, redirect resources, and restructure an entire supply chain. It was borderline impossible. But impossible was just another word for hard. He texted back, "Then we start tomorrow." "Already drafting the proposal. I'll send it to you tonight." Ethan set the phone down and rubbed his eyes. It was going to be a long few weeks, but for the first time in 9 months, he felt like he was moving forward instead of standing still. The next morning, Ethan was back at the office by 8. Lena was already there, sitting in one of the conference rooms with her team. She waved him in. "We've got a problem," she said without preamble. Ethan sat down. "What kind of problem?" "The vendor in Poland, Kowalski Logistics. They're not willing to renegotiate. They want to stick with the original contract. Did you offer them the incentive package?" "I did. They're not interested." Ethan frowned. "Why not?" "Because they don't think we're serious," Lena said. "They think this is a temporary pivot, and we'll come back to the original plan in 6 months. Then we need to convince them we're serious." "How?" Ethan thought for a moment. "I'll call them." Lena raised an eyebrow. "You think you can change their mind?" "I worked with Kowalski 3 years ago on a different project," Ethan said. "We built a good relationship. If anyone can get through to them, it's me." Lena considered this. "All right, but if it doesn't work, we're pulling them from the plan entirely." "Fair enough." Ethan went back to his desk and dialed the number. The call connected after 3 rings. "Kowalski Logistics. This is Marek." "Marek, it's Ethan Cole." There was a pause, then a laugh. "Ethan, I thought you disappeared." "I took some time off," Ethan said, "but I'm back now." "Good. We missed you. What can I do for you?" Ethan explained the situation, the regulatory changes, the restructured plan, the need to renegotiate the contract. Marek listened without interrupting. When Ethan finished, Marek sighed. "I want to help you, Ethan, but my board is not flexible on this. They see the original contract as a guarantee. If we renegotiate, they think it sets a bad precedent." "I understand," Ethan said, "but the original contract puts you in a restricted zone. If we move forward with it, you'll be locked out within a month, and then the contract is worthless anyway." Marek was quiet. "I'm not trying to back out," Ethan continued. "I'm trying to protect both of us. The revised plan keeps you in the network. It keeps you profitable, and it positions you ahead of the curve when the regulations hit." Another pause. "Send me the details," Marek said finally. "I'll talk to my board." "Thank you," Ethan said. "I'll send it today." "And Ethan?" "Yeah?" "It's good to hear your voice again." Ethan smiled. "Yours too, Marek." He hung up and walked back to the conference room. "Well?" Lena asked. "He's going to talk to his board," Ethan said. "I'll send him the revised proposal this afternoon." Lena nodded slowly. "Not bad." It's a start, Ethan said. Over the next week, the pace accelerated. Ethan and Lena worked side by side, navigating contracts, coordinating with legal teams, and managing the controlled chaos of a company-wide pivot. It wasn't smooth. There were arguments, sharp, tense exchanges over strategy and timing and risk, but they always found a way through. And somewhere along the way, something shifted. Lena stopped questioning Ethan's every move. Ethan stopped waiting for Lena to undermine him. They started finishing each other's sentences, anticipating problems before they became crises, moving in sync. Mark Sullivan noticed it first. "You two are like a well-oiled machine," he said one afternoon, watching them work through a particularly thorny vendor negotiation. Lena glanced at Ethan. "Don't jinx it." Ethan smirked. "Too late." By the end of the second week, they had renegotiated 9 of the 14 contracts. Kowalski Logistics had come through. Marek's board had agreed to the revised terms. The infrastructure development was ahead of schedule, and the board was cautiously optimistic. But then the first real test came. It started with an email from Patricia Chen. "We have a situation. The investors want a meeting. They're nervous about the pivot. They want reassurance that we know what we're doing." Ethan read the email twice. Lena was standing behind him, reading over his shoulder. "When's the meeting?" "Tomorrow," Ethan said. 2:00. Lena cursed under her breath. "We're not ready." "We don't have a choice," Ethan said. "If the investors pull out, the whole thing collapses. Then we better make sure they don't pull out." They spent the rest of the day preparing, building a presentation, anticipating questions, rehearsing answers. By midnight, they were still at it. "We should call it," Lena said, rubbing her eyes. "We're not going to be sharp tomorrow if we don't sleep." Ethan nodded. He closed his laptop and stood. Lena looked at him. "You think we can pull this off? The presentation? All of it?" Ethan met her gaze. "Yeah, I do." Lena smiled faintly. "Good, because I'm starting to believe you." The investor meeting was held in the largest conference room on the 45th floor. 12 investors sat around the table, each representing a different fund, a different stake, a different level of risk tolerance. Gerald opened the meeting. "Thank you all for coming on short notice," he said. "I know there's been concern about the recent changes to the Vanguard project. Ethan and Lena are here to walk you through the revised plan and address any questions you have." He gestured to them. Ethan stood and pulled up the presentation. 3 weeks ago, he began, we identified a critical flaw in the original Vanguard model. If we had moved forward without addressing it, we would have lost access to 35% of our projected infrastructure within 2 months. He clicked to the next slide. The revised model eliminates that risk entirely. It repositions us in markets that are not only stable, but underutilized, and it does so without increasing our overall capital expenditure. One of the investors, a man named David Chen, no relation to Patricia, raised his hand. "How do you account for the learning curve in these new markets?" he asked. "Your team has no experience in Vietnam or Tanzania. That's a liability." "It's a challenge," Ethan acknowledged, "but not a liability. We've already partnered with local consultants in each region. They're guiding us through regulatory environments, cultural nuances, and operational logistics. We're not going in blind." Another investor spoke up. "What about competition? If these markets are so attractive, why aren't others already there?" Lena stepped forward. "Because they're waiting for someone else to take the risk. We're not waiting. We're moving. And by the time they realize what we've done, we'll already be established." A woman near the back, Catherine Reeves, one of the largest stakeholders, leaned forward. "I've reviewed your projections," she said. "They're aggressive, almost too aggressive. What happens if you're wrong?" Ethan met her gaze. "If we're wrong, we lose. But if we're right, we don't just win, we redefine the playing field." Catherine studied him. "That's a big gamble." "Every investment is a gamble," Ethan said. "The question is whether you're gambling on something that's been proven to fail or something that has the potential to succeed." The room was silent. Then Catherine nodded. "All right, I'm in." One by one, the other investors followed. By the end of the meeting, every single one had reaffirmed their commitment. Gerald stood. "Thank you, Ethan, Lena, excellent work." As the investors filed out, Catherine stopped by Ethan's side. "That was impressive," she said. "But don't let it go to your head. You're only as good as your last success." Ethan smiled. "I'll keep that in mind." She left. Lena walked over, arms crossed, a faint smile on her face. "Not bad," she said. "Not bad yourself," Ethan replied. They stood there for a moment, the adrenaline still buzzing. "You hungry?" Lena asked. Ethan checked his watch. 4:30. He had time before he needed to get Jonah. "Yeah," he said. "I could eat." They went to a diner 3 blocks away. One of those places with cracked vinyl booths and a menu that hadn't changed since 1987. Lena ordered a burger. Ethan got a club sandwich. "I didn't think you ate at places like this," Ethan said. "I don't," Lena admitted. "But I figured if I'm going to work with you, I should probably get used to it." Ethan laughed. "Fair enough." They ate in comfortable silence for a while. Then Lena spoke. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Why did you really come back?" Ethan set down his sandwich. "What do you mean?" "You didn't have to," Lena said. "You could have stayed gone, let the company sink or swim without you, but you came back. Why?" Ethan thought about it. "Because I still care. About the work, about the people. And because I wanted to prove to myself that walking away didn't mean I was done." Lena nodded. "I get that." "What about you?" Ethan asked. "Why are you here?" Lena smiled faintly. "Because I wanted to prove I could do it, that I could lead something this big, that I was as good as everyone said I was. And I'm realizing that being good isn't enough," Lena said. "You have to be willing to admit when you're wrong, and that's harder than it sounds." Ethan looked at her. "You're doing fine." "Thanks," Lena said. "So are you." They finished their meal and walked back outside. The sun was starting to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. "I should go," Ethan said. "I've got to pick up Jonah." "Go," Lena said. "I'll handle the follow-up emails." Ethan nodded. "See you tomorrow." "See you tomorrow." He walked to his car and drove to Jonah's school. His son was waiting by the gate, swinging his backpack in lazy circles. "Hey, Dad," Jonah said, climbing in. "Hey, bud. How was your day?" "Good. We started a project on the solar system. I picked Jupiter." "Nice choice." Jonah grinned. "It's the biggest one." They drove home, and Ethan made dinner, spaghetti, Jonah's favorite. They ate together, talked about school and planets and everything in between. Later, after Jonah was in bed, Ethan sat on the couch with his laptop and went through the day's emails. There was one from Lena, sent 30 minutes ago. "Investors are locked in. All contracts finalized except 2. We're ahead of schedule. Good work today." Ethan smiled and typed back. "Couldn't have done it without you." A minute later, she replied, "I know." Ethan laughed and closed the laptop. For the first time in a long time, he felt like everything was exactly where it needed to be. The work, the balance, the future. And as he sat there in the quiet of his living room, he realized something. He wasn't just rebuilding his career, he was rebuilding himself. And this time, he was doing it right. The call came at 6:47 in the morning. Ethan was making breakfast, scrambled eggs and toast, when his phone lit up on the counter. Lena's name flashed across the screen. He answered on the second ring. "It's early," he said. "We have a problem." Lena's voice was tight, controlled, but Ethan could hear the edge underneath. He set down the spatula. "What kind of problem?" "The kind that could kill the whole project." Ethan's stomach dropped. "I'm listening." "The Tanzania partnership just fell through. The local firm we were working with, Nintendo Solutions, they pulled out. No warning, no explanation, just a 3-line email saying they're terminating the agreement." Ethan ran a hand through his hair. "When did this happen?" "Sometime last night. I just saw the email 20 minutes ago." "Did they give a reason?" "No, and they're not answering calls." Ethan cursed under his breath. Nintendo Solutions was the linchpin of the East African expansion. Without them, the entire regional strategy collapsed. And if that collapsed, the investor confidence they'd just secured would evaporate overnight. "How bad is it?" Ethan asked. "Bad," Lena said. "We can't move forward in Tanzania without a local partner. The regulatory environment won't allow it. And if we pull Tanzania from the plan, we lose 15% of our projected ROI. Ethan thought fast. "What about backups? Did we vet any other firms?" "2, Lena said. But they were second tier. Nintendo was the only one with the infrastructure and political connections we needed. Then we need to find out why they pulled out. I already tried. They won't talk to me. Then I'll try, Ethan said. There was a pause. You think you can get through to them? I don't know, Ethan admitted, but sitting here isn't going to solve anything. All right, Lena said. I'll keep working the backup options. You see what you can find out. Ethan hung up and looked at the stove. The eggs were starting to burn. He turned off the heat and called upstairs. Jonah, breakfast is ready! Footsteps thundered down the stairs. Jonah appeared in his pajamas, rubbing his eyes. Is it Saturday? He asked. No, bud, it's Thursday. Then why are you home? Ethan plated the eggs, slightly charred but edible, and set them on the table. I'm leaving in a few minutes. I just wanted to make sure you had breakfast first. Jonah sat down and picked up his fork. Is everything okay? Ethan hesitated. He didn't want to lie, but he also didn't want to worry his son. It's work stuff, Ethan said. Nothing you need to worry about. Jonah looked at him with those big knowing eyes. You look worried, Ethan sighed. Yeah, I am, but I'm going to figure it out. Jonah nodded and went back to his eggs. You always do. Ethan reached across the table and ruffled his son's hair. Thanks, bud. By the time Ethan dropped Jonah at school and got to the office, it was 8:30. Lena was already in the conference room, phone pressed to her ear, pacing. She hung up when she saw him. Any luck? Ethan asked. No. The backup firms are either too small or too expensive. We'd be starting from scratch, and we don't have time for that. Ethan set his laptop on the table and opened it. I'm going to try a different angle. Which is? I'm going to call Samuel Okafor. Lena frowned. Who's that? A consultant I worked with on a project in Lagos 4 years ago. He's connected all over East Africa. If anyone knows what happened with Nintendo, it's him. Lena nodded. Do it. Ethan dialed the number. It rang 6 times before someone picked up. Ethan Cole, a warm voice said. I was wondering when I'd hear from you. Ethan smiled despite himself. Samuel, it's been too long. Far too long. What brings you back to my part of the world? Ethan explained the situation, the partnership, the sudden withdrawal, the silence. Samuel listened. When Ethan finished, there was a long pause. Nintendo didn't pull out because of you, Samuel said finally. Then why? Because someone made them a better offer. Ethan's jaw tightened. Who? Devlin Global. The name hit like a punch to the gut. Devlin Global was their biggest competitor, a multinational logistics firm with deep pockets and a reputation for playing dirty. Are you sure? Ethan asked. I'm sure, Samuel said. Devlin approached Nintendo 2 weeks ago, offered them triple what you were paying plus guaranteed contracts for the next 5 years. Nintendo's board couldn't say no. Ethan closed his eyes. They're trying to block us. They're succeeding, Samuel said. Devlin knows what you're doing, and they're making sure you don't get a foothold in East Africa. Ethan exhaled slowly. What are our options? Not many, Samuel admitted. Devlin has the resources to outbid you on any partnership, and they have the influence to make life very difficult for anyone who works with you. So we're locked out. Not necessarily. Ethan opened his eyes. What do you mean? Samuel's voice dropped. There's one firm Devlin can't touch. Kijani Enterprises. They're smaller than Nintendo, but they're independent, privately owned, no board to pressure, no investors to appease. If you can convince the owner to work with you, Devlin can't stop it. Who's the owner? Her name is Amara Kijani. She's brilliant, stubborn, and she doesn't trust outsiders. But if you can get her on your side, she's worth 10 Nintendos. Ethan grabbed a pen. How do I reach her? You don't, Samuel said. She doesn't take calls from people she doesn't know. But I can make an introduction if you're willing to fly out. Ethan glanced at Lena. She was watching him, arms crossed, waiting. When? Ethan asked. Tomorrow, Samuel said. I'll set up a meeting, but Ethan, don't waste her time. Amara doesn't give second chances. Understood, Ethan said. Thank you, Samuel. Any time, my friend. Ethan hung up and looked at Lena. Well, she asked, we need to go to Tanzania. Lena blinked. We? Devlin Global is blocking us, Ethan said. They bought out Nintendo, but there's another option, a firm called Kijani Enterprises. The owner doesn't work with just anyone, but if we can convince her, we're back in. Lena processed this. And if we can't, then we're done in East Africa. Lena stared at him. Then she pulled out her phone and started typing. What are you doing? Ethan asked. Booking flights, Lena said. If we leave tonight, we can be there by tomorrow afternoon. Ethan hesitated. Lena, I can go alone. You don't have to be... Yes, I do, Lena interrupted. This is my project too, and if Devlin is trying to sabotage us, I want to look them in the eye when we beat them. Ethan couldn't help but smile. All right, let's do it. The flight left at 11 o'clock that night. Ethan had 3 hours to get home, pack, and explain to Jonah why he'd be gone for 2 days. He found his son in the living room working on his solar system project. Jupiter was half painted, bright orange and red swirls covering the foam ball. Hey, bud, Ethan said, sitting down next to him. Jonah looked up. You're home early. I need to talk to you about something. Jonah set down his paintbrush. Okay. Ethan took a breath. I have to go on a work trip, just for 2 days. Mrs. Patterson next door is going to stay with you while I'm gone. Jonah's face fell. You're leaving? I know, Ethan said. I hate it too. But this is really important, and I promise I'll be back before you know it. Jonah stared at his half-finished planet. Is this about your big project? Yeah. The one you and that lady are working on? Ethan smiled faintly. Yeah. Her name is Lena. Jonah nodded slowly. Then he looked up. Are you going to fix it? I'm going to try. Jonah studied him for a long moment. Then he picked up his paintbrush. Okay, but you have to call me every day. I will, Ethan said. I promise. Jonah went back to his painting, and Ethan sat there watching him, feeling the familiar tug of guilt in his chest. He'd worked so hard to be present, to be there, and now he was leaving again. But this time, it wasn't about ambition. It wasn't about proving himself. It was about protecting what he'd built and making sure it didn't fall apart. Mrs. Patterson arrived at 7 o'clock. She was a retired school teacher with gray hair and a kind smile. She'd looked after Jonah a few times before, and Jonah liked her. Don't worry, she told Ethan. We'll be just fine. Ethan hugged his son one more time. Be good, okay? I always am, Jonah said. Ethan laughed. Not always. Jonah grinned. Ethan grabbed his bag and headed to the airport. The flight was long. Ethan tried to sleep but couldn't. His mind kept running through scenarios, possibilities, things that could go wrong. Lena sat across the aisle, working on her laptop. She didn't look up once. Around hour 7, Ethan finally spoke. You ever been to Tanzania? Lena glanced over. No, you? Once. About 5 years ago. Different project. What was it like? Ethan thought about it. Hot, chaotic, beautiful. Lena nodded and went back to her laptop. They landed in Dar es Salaam just after 2 o'clock in the afternoon local time. The heat hit them the moment they stepped off the plane. Thick and heavy. The kind that made your shirt stick to your back within minutes. Samuel was waiting for them outside the terminal, leaning against a dusty Land Cruiser. Ethan, he called, grinning. You look like hell. Ethan laughed and shook his hand. Good to see you too, Samuel. Samuel turned to Lena. And you must be the infamous Lena Vale. Lena raised an eyebrow. Infamous? Ethan's been singing your praises, Samuel said. Lena glanced at Ethan. He shrugged. Get in, Samuel said. We've got a 2-hour drive. They climbed into the Land Cruiser and headed out of the city. The roads were rough, lined with vendors and makeshift shops. The air smelled like diesel and grilled meat. So, Samuel said as he drove, Amara agreed to meet you, but she's cautious. She's heard about Devlin's move, and she doesn't want to get caught in the middle of a corporate war. What do we need to do to convince her? Lena asked. Be honest, Samuel said. Amara values integrity above everything. If she thinks you're playing games, she'll shut you down immediately. Ethan nodded. Understood. They drove in silence for a while. The city gave way to countryside, rolling hills, scattered villages, fields of maize and cassava. Eventually, they turned onto a dirt road that led to a compound surrounded by a low stone wall. Samuel parked in front of a modest building with a corrugated metal roof. This is it, he said. They got out and followed Samuel inside. The interior was simple but clean. A woman sat behind a desk, reviewing documents. She looked up when they entered. Amara Kajani was in her mid-40s, with sharp eyes and an air of quiet authority. She wore a plain blouse and slacks, no jewelry, no pretense. "Samuel," she said, standing. "You're late." "Traffic," Samuel said with a grin. Amara's gaze shifted to Ethan and Lena. "And these are your Americans." "Ethan Cole and Lena Vale," Samuel said. "The ones I told you about." Amara gestured to the chairs across from her desk. "Sit." They sat. Amara folded her hands on the desk and studied them. "Samuel tells me you need a partner, and that Devlin Global is trying to stop you." "That's right," Ethan said. "Why should I care?" The question was blunt. No warmth, no diplomacy. Ethan met her gaze. "Because Devlin doesn't care about Tanzania. They care about market share. If they lock us out, they'll control the entire region, and once they do, they'll squeeze every advantage they can, no matter who it hurts." Amara tilted her head. "And you're different?" "We're not here to dominate," Lena said. "We're here to build long-term partnerships, sustainable growth. We succeed when our partners succeed." Amara's eyes flicked to Lena. "Pretty words. I've heard them before." "Then don't listen to the words," Ethan said. "Look at the plan." He pulled out his laptop and opened the presentation. For the next 30 minutes, he and Lena walked Amara through the entire strategy, the regional allocations, the infrastructure investments, the projected growth. Amara asked questions, hard questions. She challenged every assumption, tested every projection, pushed back on every claim. And Ethan and Lena answered, calmly, honestly, without exaggeration. When they finished, Amara leaned back in her chair. "You've done your homework," she said. "We had to," Ethan said. Amara was quiet for a long moment. Then she spoke. "Devlin offered me a deal too. Did Samuel tell you that?" Ethan's stomach tightened. "No." "They came to me 3 days ago," Amara said. "Offered me twice what you're proposing, plus guaranteed exclusivity." Lena's jaw tightened. And I turned them down." Ethan blinked. "Why?" Amara smiled faintly. "Because I don't trust them. They're vultures. They take what they need and leave nothing behind." She looked at Ethan. "You, on the other hand, Samuel vouches for you. And I trust Samuel." Ethan exhaled slowly. "So you'll work with us?" "On one condition," Amara said. "I want a seat at the table, not as a contractor, as a partner, equal say in decisions that affect this region." Ethan glanced at Lena. She nodded. "Done," Ethan said. Amara extended her hand. "Then we have a deal." Ethan shook it. So did Lena. As they walked back to the Land Cruiser, Lena let out a long breath. "That was intense," she said. "Yeah," Ethan agreed. "But we got it." Samuel clapped him on the back. "Told you she was worth it." They drove back to the city as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Ethan pulled out his phone and called Jonah. "Hey, Dad," Jonah's voice crackled through the line. "Hey, Bud, how's it going?" "Good. Mrs. Patterson made spaghetti, and we finished Jupiter." Ethan smiled. "That's great. I'm proud of you." "When are you coming home?" "Tomorrow night. I'll be there before bedtime." "Promise?" "Promise." They talked for a few more minutes, and then Jonah handed the phone to Mrs. Patterson to confirm everything was fine. When Ethan hung up, Lena was watching him. "He sounds like a good kid," she said. "He is," Ethan said. "The best." Lena looked out the window. "I don't know how you do it. The work, the parenting, all of it." "Most days I don't either," Ethan admitted. "But I keep trying. That's all you can do." Lena nodded. "Yeah, I guess so." They flew back the next morning. The return flight felt shorter, maybe because the weight had lifted. They'd done it. They'd saved the project. When they landed, Ethan went straight to the office to brief Gerald. Lena went with him. Gerald listened to the whole story without interrupting. When they finished, he leaned back in his chair. "So Devlin tried to box us out," he said. "And you went around them." "We had to," Ethan said. Gerald smiled. "Good. That's exactly what I wanted to hear." He stood and shook both their hands. "Excellent work, both of you." As they left Gerald's office, Lena turned to Ethan. "Drink?" Ethan checked his watch. 6:15. He still had time. "One drink," he said. They went to the same diner as before. Lena ordered whiskey. Ethan ordered a beer. To Tanzania, Lena said, raising her glass. To Amara, Ethan added. They clinked glasses and drank. For a while they sat in comfortable silence. Then Lena spoke. I underestimated you again. Ethan looked at her. How so? When you said you'd fix it, I didn't think you actually could. I thought it was just confidence, but you delivered. Ethan shrugged. We delivered, together. Lena smiled. Yeah, we did. She took another sip of her drink. You know, when I first took this job, I thought I had something to prove. That I needed to be the smartest person in the room, the toughest, the one who never made mistakes. And now? Now I'm realizing that's exhausting, Lena said. And it's not what actually matters. Ethan nodded. What matters is getting it right, even if it means admitting you were wrong first. Exactly, Lena said. They finished their drinks, and Ethan stood. I need to get home, he said. Jonah's waiting. Go, Lena said. I'll handle the follow-up. Ethan smiled. Thanks. He drove home, pulled into the driveway, and walked through the front door. Jonah was on the couch, watching cartoons. He jumped up when he saw Ethan. Dad! Ethan caught him in a hug. Hey, bud. I'm home. You made it before bedtime. I promised, didn't I? Jonah grinned. They spent the rest of the evening together. Dinner, homework, a chapter of the book they were reading. And when Ethan finally tucked Jonah into bed, his son looked up at him with sleepy eyes. I'm glad you're home, Jonah said. Me too, Ethan whispered. He turned off the light and closed the door. Downstairs, Ethan sat on the couch and let the exhaustion wash over him. It had been 2 days, 2 countries, one impossible problem, and they'd solved it. But more than that, he'd proven something to himself, that he could do this, the work, the balance, the life. He could be the father Jonah needed and the leader the company needed. At the same time, it wasn't easy, it wasn't smooth, but it was real. And that was enough. The next 3 weeks moved faster than Ethan thought possible. The Tanzania partnership was finalized. Amara proved to be everything Samuel had promised, sharp, resourceful, and relentless. She didn't just execute the plan, she improved it. Within 10 days, she'd identified inefficiencies in the original logistics framework and proposed adjustments that cut costs by 12% without sacrificing quality. Lena was impressed. So was Gerald. The board scheduled a final review meeting for the end of the month, a formal presentation to approve the full rollout of the Vanguard project. If they passed, the company would commit $2 billion to the initiative. If they failed, everything stopped. No pressure. Ethan spent his days coordinating with teams across 4 continents. His nights were a blur of spreadsheets, conference calls, and revisions. He saw Jonah in the mornings before school and again at bedtime, but the hours in between were swallowed whole by work. It was exactly the kind of pace that had broken him before. But this time, something was different. He wasn't doing it alone. Lena had become more than a co-leader. She'd become a partner in the truest sense. When Ethan was drowning in vendor contracts, she took over the compliance reviews. When she got stuck in a negotiation with the Romanian logistics team, Ethan stepped in and closed the deal. They didn't just divide the work, they shared it. And somehow, that made it manageable. One Friday afternoon, Ethan was in his office reviewing the final presentation when Lena knocked on the doorframe. Got a minute? She asked. Always, Ethan said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. Lena sat down and set a folder in front of him. I've been thinking about the board meeting. Yeah? We need to address the Devlin situation head on. Ethan frowned. What do you mean? They're not going to just let this go, Lena said. They tried to block us in Tanzania. They failed. But they're going to try something else. And if we don't acknowledge it in the presentation, the board is going to ask about it anyway. Ethan leaned back in his chair. You think they're planning another move? I know they are, Lena said. I got a call yesterday from one of my contacts at a trade publication. Devlin's been circulating a story that our model is unstable, that we're overextended and headed for a collapse. Ethan's jaw tightened. They're running a smear campaign. Exactly, Lena said. And if the board hears about it before we address it, they're going to get nervous. Ethan thought for a moment. So we get ahead of it. We acknowledge the competition, acknowledge the risk, and show them why our model is stronger. Lena nodded. That's what I was thinking, but we need proof. Hard data that Devlin's wrong. We have it, Ethan said. The stress tests, the contingency plans, the partnerships we've already locked in. It's all there. Then we need to make it bulletproof, Lena said. Because if Devlin gets even a crack to exploit, they will. Ethan looked at her. You're really worried about this. I'm cautious, Lena said. There's a difference. Ethan smiled faintly. All right, let's make it bulletproof. They spent the rest of the afternoon reworking the presentation. They added a section on competitive threats, backed by data showing how the Vanguard model outperformed Devlin's approach in every measurable category. They anticipated every possible question the board could ask and prepared answers for each one. By the time they finished, it was past 7 o'clock. Lena stretched and rubbed her eyes. I think we're ready. Yeah, Ethan said. I think we are. Lena stood and grabbed her bag. You heading out? Ethan glanced at the clock. In a few minutes, I need to pick up Jonah from his friend's house. Lena paused at the door. How's he doing? With everything? He's good, Ethan said. Better than I expected, actually. He's been really understanding about the hours. That's because he trusts you, Lena said. Ethan looked at her. Yeah, I hope so. Lena smiled. He does. I can tell. She left, and Ethan sat there for a moment, her words settling over him. Then he grabbed his jacket and headed out. Jonah was waiting on the front porch of his friend's house when Ethan pulled up. He waved goodbye to his friend's mom and climbed into the car. Hey, Dad, Jonah said, buckling his seatbelt. Hey, bud, how was it? Good. We played video games and made a fort. Sounds like fun. They drove in silence for a few minutes. Then Jonah spoke. Dad? Yeah? Are you going to be working this much forever? Ethan's chest tightened. What do you mean? You've been really busy lately, Jonah said, and I know it's important, but I miss you. The words hit harder than they should have. Because Jonah wasn't complaining. He wasn't angry. He was just being honest. Ethan pulled the car over to the side of the road and turned to face his son. Jonah, he said quietly, I know I've been working a lot, and I'm sorry, but this is only temporary. Once the big presentation is done, things will slow down, I promise. Jonah looked at him. Really? Really, Ethan said. And even when I'm busy, you're still the most important thing to me. You know that, right? Jonah nodded. I know. Ethan reached over and ruffled his hair. Tell you what, after the presentation, let's take a weekend trip. Just the two of us. Wherever you want to go. Jonah's eyes lit up. Really? Really? Can we go to the lake? The one with the cabins? Ethan smiled. Yeah, we can do that. Jonah grinned. Okay, deal. They drove the rest of the way home, and Ethan felt the weight on his chest lift just a little. He was doing his best, and maybe that was enough. The weekend before the board meeting, Ethan and Lena met one last time to run through the presentation. They booked a conference room on Sunday afternoon and went through the entire deck, slide by slide, question by question. Lena played the role of the skeptical board member, firing objections at every turn. Why should we trust your projections when the market is this volatile? She asked. Because our projections are based on conservative estimates, Ethan replied. We've built in buffers at every stage. Even if demand drops by 20%, we're still profitable. What about Devlin's claim that you're overextended? We're not overextended. We're strategic. We've diversified our partnerships across multiple regions to mitigate risk. If one market underperforms, the others compensate. Lena nodded. Good. But you need to say it with more conviction. The board needs to believe you're not just prepared. You're confident. Ethan ran it again. This time, his voice was steadier, stronger. Lena smiled. Better. They went through the entire presentation 3 more times. By the end, Ethan could recite every slide from memory. You ready? Lena asked. Ethan exhaled. As ready as I'll ever be. Lena packed up her laptop. You know, when I first met you, I thought you were washed up, a guy who couldn't handle the pressure and walked away. Ethan raised an eyebrow. And now? Now I think you're the toughest person I've ever worked with. Ethan blinked. That's unexpected. It's true, Lena said. Most people would have stayed gone, but you came back. You fought for this, and you didn't let anyone, including me, tell you it was impossible. Ethan looked at her. You fought for it too. Yeah, Lena said, but I needed you to remind me why it mattered. They stood there for a moment, the weight of everything they'd been through hanging between them. Thank you, Ethan said. Lena smiled. Don't thank me yet. Let's get through this meeting first. The board meeting was scheduled for Tuesday at 10 a.m. Ethan woke up that morning with his heart already racing. He made breakfast, got Jonah ready for school, and tried to act like it was just another day. But Jonah saw through it. You nervous? Jonah asked as they drove to school. A little, Ethan admitted. You're going to do great, Jonah said. Ethan smiled. Thanks, bud. And then we're going to the lake, right? Right. Jonah grinned and hopped out of the car. Ethan watched him disappear into the school, then drove to the office. Lena was already there, standing in the hallway outside the boardroom. She was wearing a charcoal suit and looked calm, composed. But Ethan could see the tension in her shoulders. Ready? She asked. Ready, Ethan said. They walked in together. The boardroom was packed. Gerald sat at the head of the table, flanked by Patricia Chen and Thomas Graves. The rest of the board members filled the remaining seats, 12 in total, and sitting in the back, arms crossed, was a man Ethan didn't recognize. Lena leaned over and whispered, That's Richard Langford, Devlin Global's chief strategist. Ethan's stomach dropped. What's he doing here? Gerald invited him, Lena said. He wanted to hear both sides. Ethan's jaw tightened. This wasn't just a presentation anymore. It was a showdown. Gerald stood. Thank you all for being here. As you know, we're here to review the final Vanguard proposal. Ethan and Lena will present first, followed by commentary from Richard Langford, who's here representing Devlin Global's perspective on the competitive landscape. Richard smiled. It was the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. Gerald gestured to Ethan. The floor is yours. Ethan stood and pulled up the presentation. For the next 45 minutes, he and Lena walked the board through the entire plan. They covered the regional allocations, the infrastructure investments, the partnerships, the timelines. They addressed every risk, every contingency, every possible point of failure, and they did it flawlessly. When they finished, the room was silent. Then Patricia spoke. That was thorough, impressive even, but I'd like to hear Mr. Langford's perspective. Richard stood. He didn't bother with a presentation. He just spoke. I'll be blunt, he said. What Ethan and Lena have proposed is ambitious, but it's also reckless. They're betting the company's future on untested markets and unproven partnerships. And they're doing it while Devlin Global is already established in the regions they're targeting. He looked at Ethan. You talk about diversification, but diversification is just another word for spreading yourself too thin. You're trying to be everywhere at once, and that's a recipe for failure. Ethan kept his expression neutral. We're not trying to be everywhere. We're being strategic. We're entering markets where Devlin hasn't established dominance yet. Because those markets are too risky, Richard shot back. There's a reason we haven't moved into Tanzania or Romania at scale. The infrastructure isn't there. The political stability isn't there. You're building castles on sand. Lena stood. With respect, Mr. Langford, that's not true. We've done extensive due diligence on every market, and we've partnered with local firms who know the landscape better than any outsider ever could. Richard smiled. Like Kajani Enterprises? Lena's eyes narrowed. Yes. A firm with no track record in large-scale logistics, Richard said. A firm run by one person with no corporate backing. That's not a partnership, that's a liability. Ethan felt the room shift. Richard was good. He was planting doubt with every sentence, but Ethan had been ready for this. Amara Kajani has successfully managed logistics operations in East Africa for 15 years, Ethan said calmly. She's built relationships with every major regulatory body in the region, and she's done it without corporate backing because she doesn't need it. She's independent, which means she's not beholden to anyone but her clients. Richard shrugged. Independence is another word for isolation. When things go wrong, and they will, she won't have the resources to recover. That's why we're partnering with her, Lena said. We provide the resources. She provides the expertise. It's complementary. Richard looked at Gerald. You're putting $2 billion into a plan built on hope and untested relationships. Devlin Global offers certainty, proven infrastructure, established markets. If you want to grow, work with someone who's already done it. The room was quiet. Then Ethan spoke. Devlin offers certainty, he said, but certainty isn't the same as opportunity. You're asking this company to follow in Devlin's footsteps, to go where they've already been, to settle for second place. He looked around the room. We're not offering certainty, we're offering leadership. We're offering the chance to define the future instead of reacting to it. And yes, that comes with risk, but every major success in this company's history has come with risk. He looked at Gerald. You didn't build this company by playing it safe. You built it by taking smart risks, and that's what we're asking you to do now. Gerald leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. Patricia spoke. What happens if Devlin undercuts you? If they drop their prices and force you out? They can't, Lena said. We've locked in long-term partnerships with pricing agreements. Devlin would have to operate at a loss to undercut us, and they won't do that. How do you know? Thomas asked. Because Devlin doesn't take losses, Ethan said. They're a publicly traded company. Their shareholders won't tolerate it. We're private. We have more flexibility. Richard smirked. You're betting that we won't fight you. That's a dangerous assumption. It's not an assumption, Ethan said. It's a calculation, and the numbers don't lie. The room fell silent again. Gerald stood. Thank you, Mr. Langford. You've given us a lot to think about. Richard nodded and left the room. Gerald looked at Ethan and Lena. We'll deliberate and give you our decision by end of day. Ethan and Lena walked out of the boardroom and into the hallway. Lena exhaled. That was brutal. Yeah, Ethan said, but we held our ground. Do you think it was enough? Ethan didn't answer right away. I don't know. They went to the coffee shop and waited. Hours passed. Ethan checked his phone every few minutes. Lena paced. Finally, at 4:47 p.m., Ethan's phone buzzed. An email from Gerald. Decision made. Come back to the office. Ethan showed Lena. They didn't say a word. They just walked. When they got back to the boardroom, the entire board was still there. Gerald stood. We've reviewed the proposal, he said, and we've considered Mr. Langford's objections. Ethan's heart pounded. The board has voted, Gerald continued, and the decision is unanimous. He paused. We're moving forward, full approval, $2 billion, effective immediately. Ethan felt the air leave his lungs. Lena's hand found his arm, squeezing once. Gerald smiled. Congratulations. Both of you. You've earned this. The room erupted in applause. Ethan and Lena shook hands with every board member. Patricia hugged them both. Thomas clapped Ethan on the back. And when it was over, Ethan and Lena walked out of that building into the fading sunlight. We did it, Lena said quietly. Yeah, Ethan said. We did. They stood there for a moment, letting it sink in. Then Lena turned to him. Drink? Ethan checked his watch. 5:30. He had time. One drink, he said. They went to the diner, ordered whiskey, raised their glasses. To the future, Lena said. To partnership, Ethan replied. They drank. And for the first time in weeks, Ethan felt like he could breathe. Later that night, Ethan sat on Jonah's bed and told him the news. We won, Ethan said. The project got approved. Jonah grinned. Does that mean we can go to the lake? Ethan laughed. Yeah, bud, we can go to the lake. Jonah threw his arms around him. I'm proud of you, Dad. Ethan held him tight. Thanks, Jonah. That means everything. He tucked his son in, turned off the light, and walked downstairs. He sat on the couch and let the silence settle over him. It had been the hardest fight of his life, but he'd won. Not just the project, but the balance, the respect, the proof that he could do both. And as he sat there in the quiet of his home, Ethan realized something. He wasn't the same person who'd walked away 9 months ago. He was stronger, wiser, more whole, and he was ready for whatever came next. The lake house smelled like pine and old wood, and something faintly sweet, maybe the wildflowers growing along the edge of the water. Ethan stood on the porch, coffee in hand, watching the morning light spread across the surface of the lake like liquid gold. The world was quiet here. No phones ringing, no emails pinging, just the sound of water lapping against the dock and birds calling to each other in the trees. Behind him, the screen door creaked open. Jonah stepped out, still in his pajamas, hair sticking up in every direction. Morning, bud, Ethan said. Jonah yawned and came to stand beside him. It's pretty here. Yeah, Ethan said. It is. They'd driven up Friday afternoon, just the two of them, and spent the weekend doing nothing important, fishing off the dock, skipping stones, making sandwiches that fell apart before they could eat them. It was the kind of weekend Ethan used to dream about when he was buried in work. Simple, unhurried, real. Jonah looked up at him. Can we stay one more day? Ethan smiled. We have to go back tomorrow. You've got school. I know, Jonah said, but it's nice here. It is, Ethan agreed. But home's nice too. Jonah nodded and went back inside to get dressed. Ethan stayed on the porch a little longer, letting the stillness settle over him. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind. Meetings, emails, conference calls with teams in 6 different time zones. The Vanguard project was officially underway. Infrastructure was being built. Partnerships were being formalized. Everything they'd fought for was happening, and Ethan was part of it. But he wasn't consumed by it. That was the difference now. He'd learned how to hold 2 things at once: ambition and presence, work and life, the drive to build something and the wisdom to know when to step back. It hadn't been easy, and it still wasn't perfect, but it was better, and better was enough. Later that morning, they packed up the car and started the drive home. Jonah fell asleep in the back seat, head against the window, mouth slightly open. Ethan glanced at him in the rearview mirror and felt that familiar tightness in his chest, the one that came from loving someone so much it almost hurt. He'd spent so long afraid of failing Jonah, afraid that choosing work meant abandoning his son, afraid that choosing his son meant giving up on himself. But the truth was simpler than that. You didn't have to choose, you just had to show up, every day, for both. They got home just after noon. Jonah woke up as they pulled into the driveway, blinking sleep from his eyes. We're home? He asked. We're home, Ethan said. They unloaded the car, and Jonah ran inside to check on his fish, a goldfish named Captain he'd won at a school carnival. Ethan carried the bags upstairs and started unpacking. His phone buzzed on the dresser, a text from Lena. Hope the lake was good. We need to talk Monday. Nothing bad, just important. Ethan stared at the message for a moment, then replied, The lake was perfect. See you Monday. He set the phone down and went back to unpacking. Monday morning came too fast. Ethan dropped Jonah at school and headed to the office. Lena was waiting in the conference room, 2 cups of coffee already on the table. You're early, Ethan said, sitting down. I couldn't sleep, Lena admitted. Ethan frowned. What's going on? Lena took a breath. I got a call last week. From a recruiter. Ethan's stomach tightened. Okay. There's an opportunity in Singapore. Chief Operating Officer for a tech firm that's expanding into logistics. It's a big job. Bigger than this. Ethan nodded slowly. And you're considering it. I don't know, Lena said. That's why I wanted to talk to you. Ethan leaned back in his chair. What do you want me to say? I want you to tell me if I'm crazy for even thinking about it, Lena said. We just got Vanguard approved. We're 3 months into the rollout. If I leave now... You're not crazy, Ethan interrupted. Lena looked at him. I'm not? No, Ethan said. You're ambitious. That's different. Lena let out a breath. But the timing is never perfect, Ethan said. If you wait for the perfect moment, you'll be waiting forever. Lena stared at her coffee. I don't want to leave you holding the bag. You're not, Ethan said. The project is solid, the team is strong, and I can handle it. Lena looked up. You're not mad? Why would I be mad? Ethan asked. You've worked your ass off for this company. If there's a better opportunity out there, you should take it. Lena's eyes were wet. She blinked and looked away. I thought you'd try to talk me out of it. I'm not going to do that, Ethan said. But I will say this. Whatever you decide, make sure it's what you actually want. Not what you think you're supposed to want. Lena nodded slowly. How do you know the difference? Ethan thought about it. You ask yourself if it makes you feel more like yourself, or less. Lena was quiet for a long moment. Then she smiled. When did you get so wise? Ethan laughed. I'm not wise. I just made enough mistakes to figure a few things out. They sat there for a while, drinking their coffee in comfortable silence. Finally, Lena spoke. I'm going to take it, Ethan nodded. Good. But I'm not leaving until the transition is done, Lena said. I'm not walking out in the middle of this. I appreciate that, Ethan said, but don't stay just because you think you have to. Stay because you want to finish what we started. Lena smiled. I do want to finish it. Then let's finish it. Over the next 6 weeks, they worked side by side to hand off the pieces Lena had been managing. Ethan took over vendor negotiations. Mark Sullivan stepped up to handle compliance. Amara flew in from Tanzania for a week to finalize the East African operations. And through it all, Lena made sure everything was airtight before she left. On her last day, their office threw her a small going-away party. There was cake and awkward speeches and a card signed by everyone on the team. Lena smiled through it all, gracious and composed, but Ethan could see the emotion underneath. When it was over, she found him in his office. Got a minute? She asked. Always, Ethan said. Lena sat down across from him. I wanted to say thank you. For what? For not making this easy, Lena said. When I first started, I thought I had to be the smartest, the toughest, the one who never made mistakes. And you showed me that wasn't true. You showed me that being good at this job means admitting when you're wrong and asking for help and trusting the people around you. Ethan smiled. You taught me a few things too. Like what? Like how to fight for something without losing yourself in it, Ethan said, and how to let someone else lead without feeling like you're giving up control. Lena laughed. We made a good team. Yeah, Ethan said. We did. Lena stood and extended her hand. Good luck, Ethan. Ethan shook it. Good luck, Lena. She left, and Ethan sat there for a long time, staring at the empty chair across from him. He was going to miss her, but he was also proud of her, and that felt like the right way to say goodbye. The months after Lena left were different. Ethan was running the Vanguard project solo now, and the weight of it was real. But it wasn't crushing. He'd learned how to carry it without letting it consume him. He set boundaries, hard ones. No emails after 6 p.m., no work on weekends unless it was absolutely critical. And every Tuesday and Thursday, he left the office at 3 to pick up Jonah from school and spend the afternoon with him. It wasn't perfect. There were still late nights and stressful calls and moments when he felt like he was barely keeping his head above water. But he was keeping his head above water. And that was the point. One Thursday afternoon, Ethan and Jonah were at the park, throwing a baseball back and forth. Jonah's aim was getting better. He didn't drop the ball nearly as much as he used to. Dad? Jonah said, winding up for a throw. Yeah? Do you ever miss Mom? The question caught Ethan off guard. Jonah threw the ball. Ethan caught it and held it for a moment. Sometimes, Ethan said honestly, but not the way you think. What do you mean? Ethan threw the ball back. I don't miss the person she was at the end, but I miss the person she used to be. Before things got hard. Jonah caught the ball and looked at it. Do you think she misses us? Ethan's chest tightened. I don't know, bud. I hope so. Jonah nodded and threw the ball again. They played for a while longer, not saying much, just being together. On the drive home, Jonah spoke again. I'm glad it's just us, he said quietly. Ethan glanced at him. Yeah? Yeah, Jonah said. I mean, I wish Mom was here sometimes, but I like how things are now. Ethan's throat closed. Me too, bud. They drove the rest of the way in silence, and when they got home, Jonah ran inside to feed Captain. Ethan stood in the driveway for a moment, looking at the house, the life they'd built together, just the two of them. It wasn't the life he'd imagined, but it was a good life, a real life, and that was enough. 6 months after the board approval, the Vanguard project hit its first major milestone. Infrastructure in Southeast Asia was fully operational. The East African expansion was ahead of schedule, and the European operations were running at 95% capacity. Gerald called Ethan into his office. I wanted to show you something, Gerald said, pulling up a report on his screen. Revenue projections for the next quarter. Ethan leaned in and read the numbers. His eyes widened. We're exceeding projections by 18%, Gerald said, across the board. Ethan exhaled. That's incredible. It's more than incredible, Gerald said. It's proof that you were right. The board was skeptical. Hell, I was skeptical. But you saw something the rest of us didn't. Ethan shook his head. It wasn't just me. It was Lena and Amara and Mark and everyone who believed in it. Gerald smiled. True. But you were the one who started it. You walked into that boardroom when no one wanted you there and made us listen. Ethan looked at him. I just didn't want to see it fail. It didn't fail, Gerald said. It succeeded, because of you. Ethan left Gerald's office and walked back to his desk. He sat down and stared at his computer screen, letting the weight of it sink in. He'd done it. Not perfectly, not smoothly, but he'd done it. That evening, Ethan picked up Jonah from school and took him out for pizza. Their usual spot, the one with the red checkered tablecloths and the jukebox in the corner. Jonah ordered pepperoni. Ethan got a veggie slice. Dad? Jonah said, mouthful of pizza. Yeah? Are you happy? Ethan paused. What makes you ask that? Jonah shrugged. You seem different lately, like lighter. Ethan smiled. Yeah, bud, I am happy. Good, Jonah said. You should be. They finished their pizza and walked out into the cool evening air. The streetlights were just starting to flicker on, casting warm pools of light across the sidewalk. As they walked to the car, Ethan realized something. Happiness wasn't something you achieved. It wasn't a destination or a milestone or a box you checked. It was something you built, day by day, choice by choice. And sometimes it meant walking away from something you loved to protect something you loved more. And sometimes it meant coming back to prove you could do both. A few weeks later, Ethan got an email from Lena. She'd been in Singapore for 3 months and was settling in well. The job was challenging, but rewarding. She missed the team. She didn't miss the winters. At the end of the email, she wrote, I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about making sure I'm doing what I actually want, not what I think I'm supposed to want. And I think I'm finally starting to understand the difference. Thank you for that. And thank you for being the kind of partner who made me better instead of smaller. I hope we get to work together again someday. Ethan read the email twice, then replied, I hope so too. And for what it's worth, you made me better too. Good luck out there, Lena. You're going to do great things. He hit send and closed his laptop. That night, after Jonah was asleep, Ethan sat on the porch with a beer and looked up at the stars. The air was cool, the sky clear. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. A car passed by, headlights sweeping across the street. Ethan thought about everything that had happened over the past year. The boardroom, the presentation, Tanzania, Lena, the project, Jonah, all of it. And he realized something important. Success wasn't about never falling. It was about getting back up when everyone expected you to stay down. It was about proving that walking away didn't mean you were weak. It meant you were strong enough to choose what mattered. And coming back didn't mean you were desperate. It meant you were ready. Ethan had spent so long afraid of failing, afraid of not being enough, afraid of losing what he'd worked so hard to build. But the truth was simpler than that. You didn't have to be perfect. You just had to be present. You didn't have to have all the answers. You just had to be willing to ask the right questions. And you didn't have to do it alone. You just had to be brave enough to let people in. Ethan finished his beer and went inside. He checked on Jonah one more time, pulling the blanket up over his shoulders and brushing the hair back from his forehead. Then he went to bed, and for the first time in a long time, he slept soundly. The next morning, Ethan woke up early and went for a run. The city was still quiet, the streets empty except for a few delivery trucks and early commuters. He ran hard, pushing himself, feeling the burn in his lungs and the ache in his legs. By the time he got back, the sun was rising. He showered, made breakfast, and woke Jonah up for school. Morning, bud, Ethan said, opening the curtains. Jonah groaned and pulled the blanket over his head. 5 more minutes. Ethan laughed. You said that yesterday. Come on, breakfast is ready. Jonah dragged himself out of bed and stumbled downstairs. They ate together, eggs and toast, orange juice, the usual. What are you doing today? Jonah asked. Meetings, Ethan said. Calls, the usual. What about you? We're presenting our solar system projects, Jonah said. I think mine is the best. Ethan grinned. Of course it is. They finished breakfast and Ethan drove Jonah to school. As his son climbed out of the car, he turned back. Dad? Yeah? Thanks for being here. Ethan's throat tightened. Always, bud. Jonah waved and ran inside. Ethan sat there for a moment, watching the door close behind him. Then he drove to the office. When he got there, Mark was waiting in the conference room with a stack of reports. "Morning," Mark said. "We've got updates from Romania and Kenya. Both teams are ahead of schedule." Ethan sat down and started reading through the reports. The numbers were good, better than good. They spent the next hour reviewing the data, making adjustments, planning the next phase. And as Ethan worked, he realized something. This was what he'd been fighting for. Not the title, not the recognition, not even the success. This, the work, the challenge, the satisfaction of building something that mattered. But more than that, the balance. The ability to be present for his son and still chase something meaningful. The ability to lead without losing himself. The ability to fall and get back up and keep going. That was the real victory. At the end of the day, Ethan packed up his laptop and headed home. He stopped at the store to pick up groceries, then drove back to the house. Jonah was already there, doing homework at the kitchen table. "How was the presentation?" Ethan asked. "Good," Jonah said. "Mrs. Holloway said mine was the most creative." Ethan smiled. "That's great, bud." They made dinner together, spaghetti again, Jonah's favorite. They ate and talked and laughed, and later, after Jonah was in bed, Ethan sat on the couch and thought about everything. A year ago, he'd been lost, broken, convinced that he'd thrown away his career for nothing, but he hadn't thrown it away. He'd chosen something more important, and in choosing that, he'd found a way back. Not to who he used to be, but to who he was meant to become. Someone who could hold two things at once: ambition and love, strength and vulnerability, the drive to succeed, and the wisdom to know when to stop. Someone who understood that being a good father didn't mean giving up on himself, and being a good leader didn't mean sacrificing everything else. It just meant showing up, every day, for both. And that was enough, more than enough. It was everything. Ethan stood and walked to the window. The street was quiet, the houses dark except for a few porch lights. He looked at his reflection in the glass, older now, a little more weathered, but still standing, still here, still fighting. And he realized something important. This wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning of the next chapter. There would be more challenges, more setbacks, more moments when he'd have to choose between what was easy and what was right. But he was ready for them, because he'd learned the most important lesson of all. You don't have to be perfect to succeed. You just have to be willing to try, to fall, to get back up, and to keep going, no matter what. Ethan turned off the light and went to bed, and as he lay there in the dark, he smiled, because he knew something now that he hadn't known a year ago. He was exactly where he was supposed to be. And tomorrow, he'd wake up and do it all again. Not because he had to, but because he wanted to, and that made all the difference. The lake house smelled like pine and old wood and something faintly sweet, maybe the wildflowers growing along the edge of the water. Ethan stood on the porch, coffee in hand, watching the morning light spread across the surface of the lake like liquid gold. The world was quiet here. No phones ringing, no emails pinging, just the sound of water lapping against the dock and birds calling to each other in the trees. Behind him, the screen door creaked open. Jonah stepped out, still in his pajamas, hair sticking up in every direction. "Morning, bud," Ethan said. Jonah yawned and came to stand beside him. "It's pretty here." "Yeah," Ethan said, "it is." They'd driven up Friday afternoon, just the two of them, and spent the weekend doing nothing important. Fishing off the dock, skipping stones, making sandwiches that fell apart before they could eat them. It was the kind of weekend Ethan used to dream about when he was buried in work. Simple, unhurried, real. Jonah looked up at him. "Can we stay one more day?" Ethan smiled. "We have to go back tomorrow. You've got school." "I know," Jonah said, "but it's nice here." "It is," Ethan agreed, "but home's nice too." Jonah nodded and went back inside to get dressed. Ethan stayed on the porch a little longer, letting the stillness settle over him. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind. Meetings, emails, conference calls with teams in 6 different time zones. The Vanguard project was officially underway. Infrastructure was being built, partnerships were being formalized, everything they'd fought for was happening, and Ethan was part of it. But he wasn't consumed by it. That was the difference now. He'd learned how to hold two things at once, ambition and presence. work and life, the drive to build something, and the wisdom to know when to step back. It hadn't been easy, and it still wasn't perfect, but it was better, and better was enough. Later that morning, they packed up the car and started the drive home. Jonah fell asleep in the back seat, head against the window, mouth slightly open. Ethan glanced at him in the rear-view mirror and felt that familiar tightness in his chest, the one that came from loving someone so much it almost hurt. He'd spent so long afraid of failing Jonah, afraid that choosing work meant abandoning his son, afraid that choosing his son meant giving up on himself. But the truth was simpler than that. You didn't have to choose. You just had to show up, every day, for both. They got home just after noon. Jonah woke up as they pulled into the driveway, blinking sleep from his eyes. "We're home?" he asked. "We're home," Ethan said. They unloaded the car and Jonah ran inside to check on his fish, a goldfish named Captain he'd won at a school carnival. Ethan carried the bags upstairs and started unpacking. His phone buzzed on the dresser, a text from Lena. "Hope the lake was good. We need to talk Monday. Nothing bad, just important." Ethan stared at the message for a moment, then replied, "The lake was perfect. See you Monday." He set the phone down and went back to unpacking. Monday morning came too fast. Ethan dropped Jonah at school and headed to the office. Lena was waiting in the conference room, 2 cups of coffee already on the table. "You're early," Ethan said, sitting down. "I couldn't sleep," Lena admitted. Ethan frowned. "What's going on?" Lena took a breath. "I got a call last week. From a recruiter." Ethan's stomach tightened. "Okay." "There's an opportunity in Singapore. Chief operating officer for a tech firm that's expanding into logistics. It's a big job. Bigger than this." Ethan nodded slowly. "And you're considering it." "I don't know," Lena said. "That's why I wanted to talk to you." Ethan leaned back in his chair. "What do you want me to say?" "I want you to tell me if I'm crazy for even thinking about it," Lena said. "We just got Vanguard approved. We're 3 months into the rollout. If I leave now—" "You're not crazy," Ethan interrupted. Lena looked at him. "I'm not?" "No," Ethan said. "You're ambitious. That's different." Lena let out a breath. "But the timing is never perfect," Ethan said. "If you wait for the perfect moment, you'll be waiting forever." Lena stared at her coffee. "I don't want to leave you holding the bag." "You're not," Ethan said, "but the project is solid, the team is strong, and I can handle it." Lena looked up. "You're not mad?" "Why would I be mad?" Ethan asked. "You've worked your ass off for this company. If there's a better opportunity out there, you should take it." Lena's eyes were wet. She blinked and looked away. "I thought you'd try to talk me out of it." "I'm not going to do that," Ethan said, "but I will say this. Whatever you decide, make sure it's what you actually want, not what you think you're supposed to want." Lena nodded slowly. "How do you know the difference?" Ethan thought about it. "You ask yourself if it makes you feel more like yourself, or less." Lena was quiet for a long moment. Then she smiled. "When did you get so wise?" Ethan laughed. "I'm not wise. I just made enough mistakes to figure a few things out." They sat there for a while drinking their coffee in comfortable silence. Finally, Lena spoke. "I'm going to take it." Ethan nodded. "Good." "But I'm not leaving until the transition is done," Lena said. "I'm not walking out in the middle of this." "I appreciate that," Ethan said. "But don't stay just because you think you have to. Stay because you want to finish what we started." Lena smiled. "I do want to finish it." "Then let's finish it." Over the next 6 weeks, they worked side by side to hand off the pieces Lena had been managing. Ethan took over vendor negotiations. Mark Sullivan stepped up to handle compliance. Amara flew in from Tanzania for a week to finalize the East African operations. And through it all, Lena made sure everything was airtight before she left. On her last day, the office threw her a small going-away party. There was cake and awkward speeches and a card signed by everyone on the team. Lena smiled through it all, gracious and composed, but Ethan could see the emotion underneath. When it was over, she found him in his office. "Got a minute?" she asked. "Always," Ethan said. Lena sat down across from him. "I wanted to say thank you." "For what?" "For not making this easy," Lena said. "When I first started, I thought I had to be the smartest, the toughest, the one who never made mistakes. And you showed me that wasn't true. You showed me that being good at this job means admitting when you're wrong and asking for help and trusting the people around you. Ethan smiled. You taught me a few things too. Like what? Like how to fight for something without losing yourself in it, Ethan said. And how to let someone else lead without feeling like you're giving up control. Lena laughed. We made a good team. Yeah, Ethan said. Why, we did. Lena stood. For a moment, she just looked at him. Then she extended her hand. Ethan shook it, but before she could pull away, he spoke. One more thing, he said. Lena paused. Yeah? You walked into that boardroom thinking I was beneath you, Ethan said, and you could have kept thinking that, but you didn't. You gave me a chance, and then you gave me respect. That meant more than you know. Lena's expression softened. You earned it, Ethan, every bit of it. She left, and Ethan sat there for a long time, staring at the empty chair across from him. He was going to miss her, but he was also proud of her, and that felt like the right way to say goodbye. The months after Lena left were different. Ethan was running the Vanguard project solo now, and the weight of it was real. But it wasn't crushing. He'd learned how to carry it without letting it consume him. He set boundaries, hard ones. No emails after 6, no work on weekends unless it was absolutely critical. And every Tuesday and Thursday, he left the office at 3 to pick up Jonah from school and spend the afternoon with him. It wasn't perfect. There were still late nights and stressful calls and moments when he felt like he was barely keeping his head above water. But he was keeping his head above water. And that was the point. One Thursday afternoon, Ethan and Jonah were at the park, throwing a baseball back and forth. Jonah's aim was getting better. He didn't drop the ball nearly as much as he used to. Dad, Jonah said, winding up for a throw. Yeah? Do you ever miss Mom? The question caught Ethan off guard. Jonah threw the ball. Ethan caught it and held it for a moment. Sometimes, Ethan said honestly, but not the way you think. What do you mean? Ethan threw the ball back. I don't miss the person she was at the end, but I miss the person she used to be, before things got hard. Jonah caught the ball and looked at it. Do you think she misses us? Ethan's chest tightened. I don't know, bud. I hope so. Jonah nodded and threw the ball again. They played for a while longer, not saying much, just being together. On the drive home, Jonah spoke again. I'm glad it's just us, he said quietly. Ethan glanced at him. Yeah? Yeah, Jonah said. I mean, I wish Mom was here sometimes, but I like how things are now. Ethan's throat closed. Me too, bud. They drove the rest of the way in silence, and when they got home, Jonah ran inside to feed Captain. Ethan stood in the driveway for a moment, looking at the house, the life they'd built together, just the two of them. It wasn't the life he'd imagined, but it was a good life, a real life, and that was enough. 6 months after the board approval, the Vanguard project hit its first major milestone. Infrastructure in Southeast Asia was fully operational. The East African expansion was ahead of schedule, and the European operations were running at 95% capacity. Gerald called Ethan into his office. I wanted to show you something, Gerald said, pulling up a report on his screen. Revenue projections for the next quarter. Ethan leaned in and read the numbers. His eyes widened. We're exceeding projections by 18%, Gerald said, across the board. Ethan exhaled. That's incredible. It's more than incredible, Gerald said. It's proof that you were right. The board was skeptical. Hell, I was skeptical. But you saw something the rest of us didn't. Ethan shook his head. It wasn't just me. It was Lena and Amara and Mark and everyone who believed in it. Gerald smiled. True. But you were the one who started it. You walked into that boardroom when no one wanted you there and made us listen. Ethan looked at him. I just didn't want to see it fail. It didn't fail, Gerald said. It succeeded. Because of you. He stood and extended his hand. I'm reinstating your position, officially. Senior Vice President of Strategic Operations, and I'm giving you full authority over the next phase of expansion. Ethan stared at him. Gerald, you've earned it, Gerald said, but I need you to agree to one condition. Ethan frowned. What condition? Balance, Gerald said. You work your ass off, Ethan, And I respect that. But you're no good to this company if you burn out. So I need you to promise me you'll keep taking care of yourself and your son. Ethan's throat tightened. I promise. Gerald nodded. Good. Now get out of here. Go celebrate. Ethan left Gerald's office and walked back to his desk. He sat down and stared at his computer screen, letting the weight of it sink in. He'd done it. Not perfectly, not smoothly, but he'd done it. That evening, Ethan picked up Jonah from school and took him out for pizza. Their usual spot, the one with the red checkered tablecloths and the jukebox in the corner. Jonah ordered pepperoni. Ethan got a veggie slice. Dad? Jonah said, mouth full of pizza. Yeah? Are you happy? Ethan paused. What makes you ask that? Jonah shrugged. You seem different lately, like lighter. Ethan smiled. Yeah, bud, I am happy. Good, Jonah said. You should be. They finished their pizza and walked out into the cool evening air. The street lights were just starting to flicker on, casting warm pools of light across the sidewalk. As they walked to the car, Ethan thought about everything that had happened over the past year. The boardroom, the presentation, Tanzania, Lena, the project, Jonah, all of it. And he realized something important. Success wasn't about never falling. It was about getting back up when everyone expected you to stay down. It was about proving that walking away didn't mean you were weak. It meant you were strong enough to choose what mattered. And coming back didn't mean you were desperate. It meant you were ready. A few weeks later, Ethan got an email from Lena. She'd been in Singapore for 3 months and was settling in well. The job was challenging but rewarding. She missed the team. She didn't miss the winters. At the end of the email, she wrote, I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about making sure I'm doing what I actually want, not what I think I'm supposed to want. And I think I'm finally starting to understand the difference. You taught me that it's okay to be human, to admit when you're wrong, to ask for help. And I'm grateful for that. I hope we get to work together again someday. Ethan read the email twice, then replied, You made me better too, Lena. You reminded me that I still had something to prove, not to anyone else, but to myself. Good luck out there. You're going to do great things. He hit send and closed his laptop. That night, after Jonah was asleep, Ethan sat on the porch with a beer and looked up at the stars. The air was cool, the sky clear. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. A car passed by, headlights sweeping across the street. Ethan thought about his ex-wife, about the note she'd left, about the way she'd walked away without looking back. For a long time, he'd carried anger about that, resentment, a feeling that he'd been abandoned. But sitting here now, he realized something. She'd been right about one thing. He was better at this than she ever was. Not because he was perfect, not because he had all the answers, but because he'd stayed, because he'd chosen Jonah, because he'd figured out how to be both a father and a man with ambition. And that was worth more than any title or promotion or validation from a boardroom full of executives. The next morning, Ethan woke up early and went for a run. The city was still quiet, the streets empty except for a few delivery trucks and early commuters. He ran hard, pushing himself, feeling the burn in his lungs and the ache in his legs. By the time he got back, the sun was rising. He showered, made breakfast, and woke Jonah up for school. Morning, bud, Ethan said, opening the curtains. Jonah groaned and pulled the blanket over his head. 5 more minutes, Ethan laughed. You said that yesterday. Come on, breakfast is ready. Jonah dragged himself out of bed and stumbled downstairs. They ate together, eggs and toast, orange juice, the usual. What are you doing today? Jonah asked. Meetings, Ethan said. Calls, the usual. What about you? We're starting a new project in science, something about ecosystems. Ethan grinned. Sounds cool. Yeah, Jonah said. I'm going to do mine on coral reef. That's a good choice. They finished breakfast and Ethan drove Jonah to school. As his son climbed out of the car, he turned back. Dad? Yeah? Thanks for being here. Ethan's throat tightened. Always, bud. Jonah waved and ran inside. Ethan sat there for a moment, watching the door close behind him. Then he drove to the office. When he got there, Mark was waiting in the conference room with a stack of reports. Morning, Mark said. We've got updates from Romania and Kenya. Both teams are ahead of schedule. Ethan sat down and started reading through the reports. The numbers were good. better than good. They spent the next hour reviewing the data, making adjustments, planning the next phase. And as Ethan worked, he thought about something his father had told him years ago, back when Ethan was just starting his career. Success isn't about how high you climb, his father had said. It's about whether you remember who you are on the way up, and whether you're still that person when you get there. At the time, Ethan hadn't understood. But he understood now. Because the truth was, he'd climbed. He'd fallen. He'd climbed again. And through all of it, he'd never stopped being a father. Never stopped being the kind of man who showed up for his son. That was the real victory. Not the project, not the title, not the recognition, but the fact that he'd managed to hold on to both pieces of himself, the ambitious strategist and the loving father, and make them fit together. It wasn't easy, it wasn't smooth, but it was real. And real was better than perfect any day. At the end of the day, Ethan packed up his laptop and headed home. He stopped at the store to pick up groceries, then drove back to the house. Jonah was already there, doing homework at the kitchen table. "How was school?" Ethan asked. "Good," Jonah said. "We started the ecosystem project. I'm doing coral reefs." Ethan smiled. "That's great, bud." They made dinner together, spaghetti again, Jonah's favorite. They ate and talked and laughed. And later, after Jonah was in bed, Ethan sat on the couch and thought about everything. He thought about Lena, halfway around the world, building something new. He thought about Amara in Tanzania, running operations with the same fierce independence that had made her so invaluable. He thought about Gerald and the board and everyone who'd doubted him and everyone who'd believed. And he thought about Jonah, asleep upstairs, dreaming about coral reefs and science projects and all the small, important things that made up a 7-year-old's world. This was his life now. Not perfect, not easy, but good, real, whole. And that was everything. Ethan stood and walked to the window. The street was quiet, the houses dark except for a few porch lights. He looked at his reflection in the glass, older now, a little more weathered, but still standing, still here, still fighting. And he realized that the lesson wasn't about winning or losing. It was about showing up every single day. For the people who counted on you, for the work that mattered, for yourself. You didn't have to be perfect. You just had to be present. You didn't have to have all the answers. You just had to be willing to ask the right questions. And you didn't have to do it alone. You just had to be brave enough to let people in. Ethan turned off the light and went to bed. And as he lay there in the dark, he smiled. Because he knew something now that he hadn't known a year ago. He was exactly where he was supposed to be. And tomorrow, he'd wake up and do it all again. Not because he had to, but because he wanted to. And that made all the difference.